I'm Leo, I'm 28, and my own mother publicly humiliated me at my sister's wedding, calling me a lowly construction worker in front of her wealthy fiancé, only for him to reveal a secret that would shatter their entire world. Before I tell you how that single moment of truth brought their perfect, curated lives crashing down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and money. Crystal chandeliers, looking like frozen waterfalls, cast a glittering, golden light over everything. A string quartet was playing something soft and classical in the corner, a sound so elegant it felt like it belonged in a different universe from my own. I stood near a towering ice sculpture of two swans, the chilled air from it making the back of my neck prickle. This was a world built on illusions, and I was the one flaw in the perfect picture. My hand, with its permanently calloused knuckles and a faint network of faded scars, looked out of place wrapped around the delicate stem of a champagne flute. I hadn't wanted to come. For 9 years I had maintained a clean, silent break. But a small, foolish part of me thought that maybe, just maybe, enough time had passed. Maybe they had changed. Maybe this was an olive branch. It wasn't. It was a trap. I saw my mother, Helen, making her way toward me. She moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her court, a smug, satisfied smile plastered on her face. She was wearing an emerald green gown that shimmered with every step, a dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent. Trailing in her wake, looking slightly uncomfortable, was James Donovan, my sister Chloe's fiancé. He was the reason this whole spectacle was possible. He was old money, the CEO of a major architectural firm, and he radiated a quiet confidence that didn't need to be loud. Leonard. My mother's voice cut through the music. It was a perfectly manicured weapon, sharp and condescending. She stopped in front of me, her eyes doing a slow, insulting sweep from my department store suit down to my polished but worn dress shoes. The smile on her face tightened with disapproval. I must say, I'm utterly shocked you decided to grace us with your presence. My throat felt like sandpaper. Hello, Mom. It's Chloe's wedding. Indeed, she sighed. A theatrical display of forbearance for James's benefit. She turned to him, her voice becoming sickly sweet. James, darling, you simply must meet my other child. This is Leonard. He's in construction. She said the word construction, as if it left a bad taste in her mouth, as if I'd just confessed to being a garbage collector. James, to his credit, didn't flinch. He offered me his hand, and his grip was surprisingly firm, his eyes kind. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Leo. Chloe has mentioned you. That slight hesitation, that flicker in his eyes, told me everything I needed to know about what she'd mentioned. But my mother couldn't leave it at that. She needed to drive the nail deeper into my coffin. She leaned closer to James, her voice a stage whisper designed to be overheard. Honestly, James, I don't know why he's even here. Why is this lowly construction worker even at a place like this? It's just so embarrassing, don't you think? The words weren't just an insult. They were a summary of my entire childhood. I felt the familiar heat of shame creep up my neck. I braced myself, ready to just nod, to absorb the blow like I always had, and then fade back into the wallpaper. But then the strangest thing happened. James Donovan's polite smile didn't just fade. It evaporated. His face went stark white. He dropped my hand and his own hand shot out, grabbing my mother's arm with a grip that made her wince. His eyes, which had been so kind just a moment before, were now blazing with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Disbelief, then a dawning, sickening realization. He leaned down, his voice no longer pleasant. It was low, sharp, and commanding. "Ma'am," he bit out, his gaze boring into my mother's. "Be quiet." My mother was so shocked she could only stammer. Excuse me? James, what is the meaning of this?" He ignored her completely. His eyes locked with mine, and in that instant, he saw something, a truth she had spent a lifetime trying to bury. "This man," James announced, his voice suddenly ringing with an ice-cold authority that silenced the string quartet and made heads snap in our direction. "This lowly construction worker, is the most valuable architect in my entire company. The world didn't just stop. It shattered. Before I was an architect hidden in plain sight, I was a boy living in an attic. My story really begins there, in the dust and the shadows of a house where I was treated more like a tenant than a son. My sister Chloe was the sun, and I was the planet that was forced to orbit her, forever in her shadow. My parents, Richard and Helen, were her devoted worshippers. The disparity wasn't just in their words. It was woven into the very fabric of our lives, into every holiday, every birthday, every single day. I remember Christmas when I was 9. I had wanted a new bicycle more than anything. My old one was a rusty hand-me-down from a cousin, with a wobbly wheel and a chain that kept slipping. I'd circled a blue 10-speed in the Sears catalog and left it on the kitchen table for weeks. On Christmas morning, there was a massive, gleaming pink bicycle with white tassels on the handlebars waiting by the tree. It was for Chloe. She rode it once, decided it was too much work, and it was left to rust in the garage. My gift was a 3-pack of gray socks and a book on practical home repairs. A man needs to know how to fix things, my father had said, not looking up from where he was helping Chloe attach her new dollhouse furniture. Birthdays were even worse. For Chloe, there were bouncy castles in the backyard, ponies for hire, and mountains of presents from dozens of squealing friends. For me, my mother would bake a plain vanilla cake from a box, and we'd eat it in near silence at the kitchen table. My one gift would invariably be something practical. A new winter coat, a sturdy pair of boots. Things I needed, yes, but never things I wanted. The day the line was drawn so clearly it might as well have been a canyon was when I was 12. I came home from school to find my room, the one I'd had my entire life, completely empty. My posters were gone. My books were in a box. My bed was stripped. I found my mother in Chloe's room, directing my father as he painted the walls a bright, bubblegum pink. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice small. My mother didn't even turn to look at me. "Chloe needs a bigger room, Leonard. She's a young lady now. She needs more space for her things. You'll be in the attic." Just like that. No discussion. No asking how I felt. It was a decree. The attic was a grim, forgotten space. It smelled of mothballs and old wood. A single, grimy window looked out onto nothing but the neighbor's roof. In the summer, it was an oven. In the winter, my breath would form clouds in the air. I would lie awake on a lumpy mattress on the floor, listening to the muffled sounds of my family living their real lives in the warm, bright house below me. I wasn't part of it anymore. I was storage. The only person who ever made me feel seen was my grandfather. He was my father's father, a quiet, gentle man who had worked with his hands his whole life. He passed away from a heart attack when I was 10, a loss that carved a hole in my world that my parents never even tried to fill. He was the one who had named me Leonard. "It means lion strong," he told me, ruffling my hair. "Don't you ever forget that." He saw the way I would spend hours drawing, sketching buildings and cars and anything I could imagine. He saw the passion my parents dismissed as a phase. For my 10th birthday, just before he died, he gave me a beautiful, professional set of drafting tools in a worn leather case. It was the most thoughtful gift I had ever received. "You have a fire in you, son," he'd said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "You see the world differently. You see how things fit together. People will try to tell you what you're worth, try to put you in a box. Don't you ever let them. You take this fire and you build something magnificent with it." After he was gone, and I was exiled to the attic, that leather case was my only real possession. At night, when the loneliness felt like a physical weight on my chest, I would open it. I'd run my fingers over the cool metal of the compasses and rulers, and I would repeat his words like a prayer. Build something magnificent. In that cold, dusty attic, those words were the only thing that kept me from freezing over completely. They were the first blueprint for the man I would have to become. High school became my sanctuary and my workshop. I wasn't just studying, I was forging armor. Every A on a report card, every commendation from a teacher, was another plate of steel. I took advanced math, physics, and every drafting and design class the school offered. I spent my lunches in the library, poring over books on Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha Hadid. While other kids were navigating the social minefield of adolescence, I was building my escape rocket one equation at a time. I graduated third in my class. My crowning achievement wasn't the diploma. It was the thick, cream-colored envelope that arrived in the mail in early April. The official letterhead of the State University's College of Architecture and Design was staring up at me. I'd been accepted into their prestigious 5-year program. They were even offering me a partial academic scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, but it was a start. It was validation. It was a ticket out. I remember my hand shaking as I walked into the kitchen, the letter clutched like a holy relic. My parents and Chloe were at the table, discussing plans for Chloe's upcoming Sweet 16 party. The budget, apparently, was limitless. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice cracking with a nervous excitement I couldn't contain. It came. The letter from the university. My mother glanced up from a catalog of party decorations. "Oh?" And I placed the letter on the table with a reverence it didn't deserve in that house. I got in. Architecture. With a scholarship. My father picked it up. He read it with the same emotional investment he'd give to a grocery receipt. There was no smile, no exclamation of pride. He just folded it neatly and placed it beside his plate. "That's nice, Leonard," he said. "Good for you." I waited. Surely there was more. A congratulations. Maybe? A question about the program? Nothing. The conversation immediately shifted back to whether they should hire a DJ or a live band for Chloe's party. I had to force the issue. "So," I began, my throat dry, "the tuition is in the packet. Even with the scholarship, it's a lot." I was thinking we could finally talk about the college fund. My mother let out a tittering laugh, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Leonard, you have such an imagination. A college fund? For you? Don't be silly." I stared at her, the hope that had been soaring in my chest suddenly plummeting. "What are you talking about? You've been putting money into a savings account since we were kids. For college." "Yes, for college," my father said, his voice taking on a hard, lecturing tone. "But an investment has to be smart. We have to put our resources where they'll give the best return. Chloe has been accepted to 3 private out-of-state universities. Those are the kinds of institutions that build connections, that create a future. That's where the college fund is going." The room began to tilt. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. They weren't just saying no. They were giving me a business-minded analysis of why I was a bad investment. "But my grades are better," I argued, my voice weak. "My program is top-ranked. This has been my dream since I was a kid." "Dreams don't pay the bills, Leonard," my mother said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You need to be realistic. You're good with your hands. Get a job. Go to a trade school if you must. There's no shame in honest work. In fact, it's time you learn to be independent and stand on your own 2 feet." The hypocrisy was suffocating. They demanded my independence while paving Chloe's road with gold. They were amputating my future to build a throne for her. My father delivered the final, crushing verdict. "This conversation is over, Leonard. Our decision is final. The money is for your sister. You need to start pulling your own weight around here." That was it. The last, fragile thread of hope I had that they might one day see me, that they might one day value me, snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. A cold, profound calm washed over me. I finally understood. I could get a perfect score on every test, win a Nobel Prize, and in their eyes, I would still be worth less than one of Chloe's discarded whims. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I went up to the attic, to my cold, lonely room, and packed a single duffel bag. I packed my clothes, the few books I owned, and my grandfather's drafting tools. I left everything else behind. As I walked down the stairs and toward the front door, they didn't even look up from their party planning. I could have been a ghost for all they cared. I stepped out into the afternoon sun, pulled the door closed behind me, and listened to the soft click of the latch. It was the quietest, most liberating sound I had ever heard. I was finally free. My new kingdom was a 300-square-foot studio apartment on the top floor of a walk-up building. The paint was peeling, the faucet dripped with a maddening rhythm, and the single window faced a grimy air shaft. It was the most beautiful place I had ever lived. It was mine. I found a job as a general laborer for a construction company. The work was brutal. It was a world of sweat, sawdust, and the constant scream of power tools. I'd come home each night physically shattered, my muscles aching in ways I didn't know were possible. My hands, which I had once hoped would design beautiful buildings, were now blistered and raw from hauling drywall and mixing concrete. My dream of being an architect felt like a cruel joke. But in the quiet solitude of my tiny apartment, a strange thing happened. I began to feel a sense of self-worth I had never known. Every dollar in my pocket was a dollar I had earned. Every meal I ate, no matter how simple, was a meal I had provided for myself. I was exhausted, I was poor, but I was not dependent. I was not a burden. I was self-sufficient. For 2 years, my family and I existed in separate universes. I sent a simple postcard on holidays, more out of a sense of robotic duty than any real affection, and received nothing in return. I heard through my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister who occasionally called to pry for information, that Chloe was flourishing at her expensive university. She was the star of her sorority, majoring in communications, and had recently been discovered by a talent agency. I'd just grunt a non-committal response and change the subject. Then, one evening after a grueling 12-hour shift, my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was an alien sound, artificially bright and cheerful. "Luo," she sang, drawing out my name. "Big brother. I bet you're surprised to hear from me." "That's one word for it," I said, sitting on the edge of my mattress and pulling off my work boots. "What do you need, Chloe? Always so direct." She laughed, a sound that grated on my ears. "Can't a sister just call to see how her favorite brother is doing?" "You're my only sister, Chloe." "Exactly." She plunged into a breathless monologue about her fabulous new life. She was modeling, doing photo shoots, and making, in her words, an absolutely insane amount of money. I listened in silence, picking at a callus on my palm. I knew this wasn't a social call. Chloe never did anything without a motive. Finally, she got to it. "Anyway, Leo, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About family. About Mom and Dad. They've sacrificed so much for us, you know? And I feel like it's our turn to give back. To show them how grateful we are." I almost choked. "Sacrificed for us? Chloe, they paid for every last bit of your 4-year vacation at party school. They wouldn't even help me with a student loan application." "Oh my God, are you still on about that?" She sighed, her voice dripping with impatience. "You need to let that go. It's in the past. This is about being a good family now. Look, my proposal is this. I'm going to start sending Mom and Dad $4,000 a month, and I think you should match it. It would be a wonderful gesture." The number was so absurd I actually laughed. "4,000? Chloe, do you have any idea how much I make? My entire monthly salary is less than that after taxes. It's impossible." This is where the master manipulator emerged. Her voice softened, becoming gentle and persuasive. "Is it, Leo? Or is it just hard? I know you work long hours. You could pick up a weekend job, couldn't you? You're a strong guy. And think about it. Think about what this would mean to Mom and Dad. It would prove you care. It would prove you're not the selfish person they think you are." Her words were a carefully crafted poison, designed to hit my deepest insecurity. The selfish person they think you are. She went in for the kill. "Maybe, if you did this, they'd finally be proud of you, Leo. Don't you want that? Don't you want them to finally see you as a good son?" It was a low blow, and it landed perfectly. A pathetic, wounded part of me, the boy who just wanted his parents to clap at his school play, stirred to life. I was so starved for a crumb of their approval that I was willing to work myself to death for it. It was stupid. It was irrational. But the emotional hook was set too deep. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like defeat. "Okay, Chloe, I'll do it." "I knew you would," she squealed, her cheerful voice instantly returning. "You're the best. Don't worry about the logistics. I'll handle everything. I'll set up a special direct deposit system so it's a nice, clean payment for them every month. Just send me your banking information." I gave it to her. I was a fool. I had just handed the keys to my entire life over to the person who had benefited most from my misery. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay on my back, staring at the water-stained ceiling, crushed by the impossible promise I had just made. I wasn't just building houses anymore. I was building my own cage. The next 3 years weren't a life. They were a sentence. My existence was stripped down to 3 essential components: work, more work, and a few hours of exhausted, dreamless sleep. My primary job at the construction company became even more demanding. I volunteered for every overtime shift, every holiday, every weekend project. I became known as the guy who never said no. The physical toll was immense. My body was in a constant state of protest. My back ached perpetually. My knees creaked every time I stood up, and my hands were a roadmap of cuts, scrapes, and deep, ingrained grime that no amount of scrubbing could ever fully remove. But that was only half of it. To make the impossible $4,000 payment, I took a second job. It was the only one that fit my schedule: a weekend security guard position. From 6 p.m. on Friday to 6 a.m. on Monday. My home was a tiny, climate-controlled booth at the entrance of a sprawling, half-built corporate campus on the edge of town. Those weekends were a special kind of hell. The loneliness was a physical presence. I would sit for 12-hour shifts, staring at a bank of grainy black and white monitors that displayed silent, ghostly images of empty parking garages and skeletal steel corridors. The only sounds were the hum of the electronics and the frantic beating of my own heart in the dead of night. I would fight off sleep by chugging bitter, lukewarm coffee from a thermos and doing push-ups on the cold linoleum floor until my arms trembled. My daily routine was a brutalist masterpiece of efficiency. The alarm would blare at 4:30 a.m. I'd force myself out of bed, swallow a couple of protein bars while my coffee brewed, and be out the door by 5:15 to catch the first bus. I worked a 10 to 12-hour shift, came home, and had exactly 90 minutes to shower, eat, and study. Because even in this self-imposed prison, I hadn't completely abandoned my grandfather's words. I couldn't afford a single credit at a university, but the internet was a lifeline. I scraped together enough money to enroll in online certification programs for AutoCAD, project management, and structural engineering. I'd prop my laptop on a stack of books and force my tired, blurry eyes to focus on complex diagrams and dense technical manuals. My brain felt like it was wading through mud, but I pushed on. It was my one act of defiance. My secret investment in a future I wasn't even sure I'd live to see. My social life vanished. Friends stopped calling when I turned down every invitation. My apartment was a testament to my Spartan existence. A mattress on the floor, a hot plate, a mini fridge containing only milk and eggs, and stacks of textbooks. I lost weight. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. My best friend, Noah, was the only one who refused to let me disappear completely. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced, holding a pizza box. "You look like death, man," he said one night, his face etched with worry as he took in my gaunt appearance. "This is insane. You have to stop. You're killing yourself for people who wouldn't spit on you if you were on fire." "It's my responsibility," I'd mumble, the words a hollow mantra I no longer believed but couldn't stop repeating. "No, it's not. It's abuse," he'd argue. "They're exploiting your sense of duty, and Chloe is the ringleader. This is wrong, Leo." I knew he was right, but I was in too deep. Admitting he was right would mean admitting the last 3 years of my life, the immense sacrifice, had all been for nothing. I wasn't strong enough for that. There was a subtle shift at my construction job. The other guys, men who had initially been wary of the quiet kid who read books during lunch, started to show a grudging respect. The foreman, a tough old guy named Sal, started giving me more complex tasks, trusting me with reading blueprints and making critical measurements. My colleague Mark, who used to mock me, stopped his teasing. One day, he saw me struggling to decipher a particularly complex structural drawing. He came over, pointed to a section, and said, The load-bearing calculation is off there. You need to account for the lateral shear from the crossbeam. I looked at him, surprised. He just shrugged. My old man was an engineer. I picked up a few things. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. It was an acknowledgement that I was more than just a pair of hands. Every month, on the 28th, I would watch the $4,000 transfer leave my account. The feeling was no longer accomplishment. It was just a dull, hollow ache. A monthly reminder of the price of my own foolish hope. The phone call came on a Tuesday. I remember the day with perfect clarity because it was the day the world stopped making sense. I'd just gotten home from a 14-hour shift. It had been raining all day. A cold, miserable drizzle that had soaked through my jacket and chilled me to the bone. All I wanted was a hot shower and to fall into bed. As I was peeling off my wet socks, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. Hello? Is this Leonard? The voice was sharp, cold, and vibrating with an anger that was so intense it felt electric. Even through the phone. It was my mother. In 3 years, they had never called me once. My stomach immediately clenched into a tight, painful knot. My first thought was that something terrible had happened. Someone was sick. Someone had died. Mom? What's wrong? Is everyone okay? A harsh, ugly laugh crackled down the line. Is everyone okay? No, Leonard. Everything is most certainly not okay. I want to know what kind of twisted, pathetic game you think you're playing. I was utterly bewildered, my tired brain struggling to catch up. Game? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Oh, don't play dumb with me, she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. It's insulting. We get the bank notification every month. The money? Leonard. Or should I say, the lack of it. Are you trying to mock us? After everything we've done for you, this is the thanks we get? You send us 50 cents. The words were so bizarre they didn't register at first. 50 cents? It was like she was speaking a different language. I sank down onto the edge of my mattress, the wet, cold floor forgotten. 50 cents? Mom, that's crazy. I sent the money. For $1,000. The transfer went through last Thursday, just like always. I can send you the confirmation. There was a muffled sound, and then my father's voice, a low and menacing growl, replaced my mother's. Don't you dare lie to us, boy. Do you think we're stupid? We see it in black and white. A $4,000 transfer from your sister. A daughter who actually understands what family means. And a transfer from you for 50 cents. It says it right on the statement. From Leonard. What is that supposed to mean? Is that all you think we're worth? My own bank statement was burned into my memory. The clean, unambiguous line item. Automatic transfer for $1,000. It was a fact. It was the central, organizing fact of my entire miserable existence. And they were telling me it wasn't real. I swear to you, I pleaded, my voice cracking. I am sending the money. Every single cent. I work 2 jobs, I barely sleep. Everything I earn goes to you. My mother snatched the phone back. Her voice was pure venom. Oh, save the sob story, Leonard. We know what's really going on. Your sister is a successful model, living in the city, making a name for herself. It's obvious she's the one with the high salary. You're probably just enjoying your bachelor life, spending every penny on yourself without a care in the world. You are an embarrassment. Why can't you be more like your sister? The line went dead, leaving a dial tone buzzing in my ear. I slowly lowered the phone. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows on the wall. The injustice of it was a physical force. It buckled my knees. I slid off the mattress and onto the floor, my head in my hands. I thought of the weekends spent in a lonely security booth. I thought of the meals I'd skipped to save a few dollars. I thought of the calluses on my hands, the permanent ache in my back. All of it, all of that sacrifice, all of that pain had been erased, replaced by an absurd, insulting lie. It wasn't just that they didn't appreciate me. It was that they had constructed a reality in which I was a failure and a liar, and my sister was a saint. They weren't just ungrateful. They were delusional. And for the first time, A terrifying new thought pierced through my grief. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. For the next 24 hours, I was a ghost. I went to work, but I was on autopilot. I swung the hammer, I carried the lumber, but my mind was miles away, trapped in a fog of disbelief and a growing, sickening suspicion. My mother's words echoed in my head. 50 cents. More like your sister. That night I called Noah. I laid out the entire, insane conversation, my voice a monotone drone. I was past the point of emotion. I was just a recorder playing back the data of my own destruction. Noah listened without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or easy sympathy. He offered a strategy. Leo, get a grip. You're not crazy. The money is leaving your account. The problem isn't on your end. The problem is the system itself. Who set it up? Chloe did, I said. She said she'd handle it, make it easy. Of course she did, Noah said, his voice grim. That's the flaw in the design, man. You've let her control the flow of information. You need to bypass her. Go to the bank. First thing tomorrow. Don't just look at your statement. You need to request the full, detailed wire transfer records for the past year. You need to see the routing numbers, the intermediary accounts, everything. Follow the money, Leo. The next morning, I felt a tremor in my hands as I walked toward the bank. I took the day off, claiming I had a fever. It wasn't entirely a lie. I felt sick to my stomach. I sat across from a young, efficient-looking banker and explained, as calmly as I could, that I suspected fraudulent activity on a recurring transfer. He typed briskly, his eyes scanning the screen. After a few minutes of clicking, he frowned. Well, this is unusual, sir. He turned the monitor toward me. There, on the screen, was the architecture of my own betrayal. The $4,000 did leave my account every month. But it didn't go to my parents. It went to a third-party payment processing account. An account registered under the name C. Enterprises. From that account, 2 new transfers were initiated moments later. One, for the pathetic sum of 50 cents, was sent to my parents' account with the memo line, "From Leonard." The other, for the full $4,000, was sent to the same account with the memo, "From Rainbow." Rainbow? I whispered, the word leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. It was so childishly simple, it was brilliant. Chloe's modeling alias, the one she thought was so clever, was Rain. Rainbow. It was her digital signature on the crime scene. She had built a system that didn't just steal my money, it stole my identity, my sacrifice itself. She was laundering my hard work and passing it off as her own generosity, all while making me look like a cheap, uncaring monster. A cold, clear rage began to burn away the fog in my mind. This wasn't enough. I needed the whole picture. I called a guy I knew from an old construction job, a man whose brother worked as a private investigator. It would cost me nearly everything I had left in my savings, but I didn't care. I asked him to do a full financial background check on my parents, Richard and Helen. I needed to know what kind of dire straits they were in that required such a massive monthly bailout. The call came back that evening. The investigator's voice was professional and detached. "Mr. Leo, I have the information you requested. There is no significant family debt. Their mortgage is current. No outstanding loans or major medical expenses. However, there is a consistent pattern of high-volume spending. Multiple monthly withdrawals from ATMs near the Atlantic City casinos. Regular, substantial charges from luxury retailers like Neiman Marcus, Gucci, and Nordstrom. In short, sir, your parents aren't struggling. They're on a permanent vacation, funded by you." I thanked him and hung up the phone. I stood in the middle of my small apartment, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together to form a monstrous, ugly picture. It was all a lie. The whole thing. The family debt, the struggle, their financial need. It was all a grand performance. A play in which I was the unwitting and only financial backer. The last ounce of filial loyalty, of childish hope, curdled into something hard and final. I walked over to my laptop, my movements calm and precise. I logged into my bank account. I navigated to the Scheduled Payments tab. I found the recurring $4,000 transfer. And without a moment's hesitation, I clicked the button that said, "Cancel this transfer." A small pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" I smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Oh, I'm sure." The storm broke 4 days later. It arrived on a Saturday, just as I knew it would. The knock on my door wasn't a polite tap. It was a furious, insistent pounding that rattled the cheap wood in its frame. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and opened it. The unholy trinity stood there, framed in the dingy hallway. My father, his face a thundercloud of rage. My mother, her arms crossed, radiating pure indignation. And Chloe, lurking behind them, her face a carefully composed mask of wounded innocence. They didn't wait for an invitation. My father brushed past me, his shoulder deliberately knocking into mine. They invaded my small space, their expensive perfumes and colognes instantly overwhelming the simple scent of my apartment. "What is the meaning of this?" my father barked, spinning to face me. He gestured around the room with disgust. "This is where you live. A hovel? And you have the nerve to cut us off." I calmly closed the door, shutting out the rest of the world. This was going to be a private exorcism. "The money didn't arrive. I take it." "Of course it didn't arrive," my mother snapped. "We called the bank. They said the transfer was canceled. Do you have any idea the position you've put us in? We have bills to pay. Responsibilities." "Really?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "What kind of responsibilities? Your tab at the casino? Chloe's latest shopping spree? I'm curious, which one was it?" The effect was instantaneous. 3 faces, 3 masks of outrage, all frozen in shock. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw went slack. Chloe's eyes widened, a cornered animal's panic flaring within them. I don't know what you're talking about," my father stammered, his blustering rage deflating into weak denial. "Don't you?" I took a step forward, holding up my phone. I had the screenshots ready. "Let's talk about it. Let's talk about C. Enterprises and a little stage name called Rainbow. It's a cute trick, Chloe. Very creative. Stealing my entire salary every month is one thing, but turning it into a 50-cent insult? That's a special kind of evil." Chloe began to tremble. That's a lie. You're making it up." "Am I?" I swiped to the next picture, a summary of the investigator's report. "And what about this? The family debt that doesn't exist. The casino trips, the shopping. You've been living like royalty on a construction worker's salary." "My salary." Silence. Thick, suffocating, guilty silence. They had nothing. No defense, no explanation. They had been caught, red-handed, in a lie that had spanned years. But my family was never one to be burdened by facts or shame. When cornered, they didn't surrender. They attacked. Chloe was the first to find her voice, and it was a shriek of pure, undiluted fury. "So what?" she screamed, her mask of innocence shattering into a million pieces. "So what if I did? You owed us. You left. You walked out on this family and left us to fend for ourselves. You think you can just live your own life and not contribute? That money was your penance. It was the bare minimum you could do for being such a selfish, ungrateful son." I was stunned into silence by the sheer audacity of her logic. She had twisted my victimization into my own crime. My parents, seeing their golden child's narrative, immediately latched onto it. "She's absolutely right," my mother declared, her voice regaining its strength. "You have a duty. We are your parents. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head, food on your table. That is a debt you can never repay. You owe us your loyalty, your respect, and yes, your salary." The dam inside me, the one that had held back a decade of pain and resentment, finally broke. "Oh, you!" The roar came from somewhere deep in my soul, a raw, powerful sound that made all 3 of them flinch back. "I owe you nothing. You owe me. You owe me a childhood. You owe me a future. A roof over my head is not a favor. It's the legal and moral obligation of a parent. You don't get a medal for not letting your child starve. You forfeited the right to call yourselves parents the day you told me my dreams were a bad investment and threw me in the attic. The rage felt clean, purifying. I was finally saying the words I had swallowed for a lifetime. My father, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple, took a menacing step toward me. He was bigger than me, and for a second, the old, ingrained fear of him flickered inside me. But it was quickly extinguished by the fire of my anger. You will not speak to your mother that way, he seethed, jabbing a finger in my face. You are a disrespectful, worthless boy who has forgotten his place. Now, you are going to get on that little computer of yours, and you are going to reinstate that payment. This is not a discussion. It was the same tone he'd used my whole life. The tone of absolute authority, expecting nothing but immediate, fearful compliance. He was still trying to play the king in a kingdom that had long since crumbled. I looked at his furious face, at my mother's contemptuous sneer, at my sister's venomous glare, and I felt nothing. No love, no fear, no sense of obligation. The emotional chains they had wrapped around me for 25 years had finally rusted through and fallen away. No, I said. The word was quiet, calm, and utterly immovable. My father's face contorted in disbelief. What did you just say to me? I said no. I repeated, my voice even. It's over. The money is gone. You are on your own. The sheer finality in my tone seemed to genuinely shock them. They had come here for a fight they were certain they would win. They had expected me to yell, to cry, to eventually break down and give them what they wanted. The concept of a simple, unbreakable no was not in their playbook. My father, sputtering, searched for his trump card. He looked around my sparse apartment, his eyes filled with scorn, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. He thought he'd found the one lever he had left to pull, the one thing that could still hurt me. Fine, he sneered. Be that way. If you're going to be so selfish with your own money, we'll just have to use money that isn't yours. We'll use the inheritance your grandfather left for you. I'm sure a lawyer can get that sorted out. We'll see how you feel when we're spending Grandpa's hard-earned savings. He delivered the line with a triumphant flourish. Checkmate. He was threatening to desecrate the one pure, loving memory I had. He was threatening to take the last gift from the only person who had ever believed in me and use it to fund their parasitic lifestyle. And in that moment of supreme cruelty, he didn't break me. He liberated me. A laugh bubbled up from my chest. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was a raw, cathartic, and utterly freeing sound. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. They stared at me, their expressions shifting from triumph to confusion. Go ahead, I gasped, wiping my eyes. Please, try. Hire a lawyer. Take me to court. The inheritance is in a trust. It requires my signature for any withdrawal before I turn 30. A signature? I said, my voice dropping to a dead serious whisper. That you will get over my dead body. The blood drained from his face. He had overplayed his hand and lost everything. My laughter subsided, replaced by a cold, hard finality. I walked to my front door and wrenched it open, holding it wide. Get out, I said. My voice was no longer loud, but it had the unyielding force of a glacier. All of you, now. Leonard, you can't mean this, my mother pleaded, her tone shifting to one of panicked disbelief. We're your family. I looked her dead in the eye. The moment you threatened to steal from my grandfather's memory, you stopped being my family. You are nothing to me now. They stumbled out into the hallway, a mess of shocked, angry protests. Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred that I met with complete indifference. I watched them go, and then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The war was over. I had lost a family, but I had finally won my life. And so we returned to the wedding, to the deafening silence in the grand ballroom, to the shattered expressions on the faces of my so-called family. My mother, for once in her life, was speechless. She looked at me, then at James, then back at me, her mind clearly unable to compute this new reality. Valuable architect? She stammered. the words foreign on her tongue. That's impossible. He's a laborer. He gets his hands dirty. He works in construction. James released her arm, his disappointment in her so profound it was almost pity. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just a boss, but an ally. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent question. Are you ready? I held his gaze and gave a single, slow nod in return. Let them have it. He turned to the room of silent, staring guests, his voice projecting a calm, commanding authority that immediately drew everyone in. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you all an apology for this family drama. But more importantly, I owe this man an explanation and a public acknowledgement of the truth. He let his gaze sweep the room, ensuring he had everyone's undivided attention. As most of you know, my firm, Donovan Architectural Group, is in the business of creating legacies. We design and build the skyscrapers, museums, and civic centers that will define this city for the next century. This work requires the best and brightest minds in the world. It requires vision, dedication, and a level of talent that is exceedingly rare. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he turned and looked directly at me. The warmth and respect in his expression were so genuine, so validating, it almost brought me to my knees. 4 years ago, James began, his voice resonating with a storyteller's cadence, I was reviewing applications for a junior draftsman position, hundreds of them, all from top graduates of prestigious universities. And then I saw a portfolio that was different. It wasn't polished. It was submitted by a young man with no formal degree, just a collection of online certifications. But the designs were breathtaking. They were raw, but they had a spark of absolute, undeniable genius. I hired him on the spot, against the advice of my entire HR department. I could feel my face flushing as people turned to stare at me, their expressions shifting from confusion to intrigue. That young man, James continued, his voice swelling with pride, proved to be the hardest working person I have ever met. He absorbed information like a sponge. He worked weekends. He stayed late, not because he was asked, but because he was obsessed with solving problems. He rose from draftsman to senior designer in record time, all based on pure merit. He then raised his hand and pointed toward the large windows that overlooked the city skyline. Last year, we faced a crisis. Our flagship project, the new Donovan Tower, was on the brink of collapse. Not literally, but financially. We had a catastrophic flaw in the design of the central load-bearing core. Our team of seasoned, Ivy League-educated architects had been working on a solution for months and had come up with nothing. The client was threatening to pull the plug on a 9-figure contract, a move that would have been devastating for my company. The room was utterly silent, hanging on his every word. One Monday morning, a new set of blueprints was on my desk. They were submitted anonymously. They didn't just fix the flaw. They reimagined the entire structural concept. The design was revolutionary, a perfect marriage of elegance and engineering that was more efficient, more cost-effective, and more beautiful than our original plan. It didn't just save the project. It elevated it to something iconic. James took a step towards me and put a hand on my shoulder. His voice boomed through the ballroom. The anonymous genius who saved the Donovan Tower, the man whose vision will be the centerpiece of this city's skyline for the next 100 years, is the man my future mother-in-law just called a lowly construction worker. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce you to Leo, our head of conceptual design, and the single most brilliant architectural mind I have ever had the privilege to work with. A wave of audible gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was a Hollywood moment, too dramatic to be real, yet it was happening. I saw jaws drop. I saw people who had looked right through me just minutes before now staring at me with a newfound, startling respect. James wasn't done. He wanted to salt the wound. And as for his time in construction, you're right, Helen, he has worked in the field. I know this because long before I hired him, I'd visit my company's work sites. And the foremen, men I've known for decades, would tell me stories about a young kid from years ago who worked 2 back-breaking jobs, who they'd find passed out during his lunch break, using a structural engineering textbook as a pillow. They spoke of his work ethic with a reverence they usually reserve for legends. His character was forged in the dirt and the sweat you so casually dismiss. He hasn't forgotten where he came from. The tragedy is that his own family has. My mother stood there, her face a grotesque collage of shock, horror, and dawning comprehension. The world she had built, a world that ran on a simple, comforting lie. Chloe the success, Leo the failure, had just been obliterated by a nuclear truth. The revelation of my professional identity was the earthquake, but what followed was the tsunami that would wash away every last remnant of their carefully constructed lives. James took his hand off my shoulder, but his supportive presence remained. The warmth in his eyes as he looked at me was replaced by a glacial coldness as he turned his attention to Chloe. She was sitting at the head table, looking small and fragile, a porcelain doll that had just been cracked. Her perfect, photogenic smile was gone, replaced by a trembling lip and wide, terrified eyes. "Chloe," James said, and his voice, though not raised, cut through the ballroom with the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel. "We've spent countless hours talking about our lives, our families. You told me about your brother. You painted a picture of a man who was lost, unambitious, someone you felt sorry for. You said you had to cut him off because he was a drain on the family. A drain." He repeated the word, letting it hang in the air, heavy with accusation. "James, please," she whispered, her voice a pathetic whimper. "This is a misunderstanding. We can talk about this in private." "We're long past private conversations, Chloe," he said, his voice unyielding. "I want to talk about it now. I want you to explain to me, and to all our friends and family here today, about Rainbow. I want you to explain the accounting system you created to steal your brother's entire salary for 3 years. A salary, I might add, that he was earning while working 2 physically punishing jobs to send home money you told him your parents desperately needed." The word stole echoed in the silent room. This was no longer just a family squabble. It was a public accusation of a crime. He didn't wait for her answer. His gaze moved to my parents, who looked like they were about to be sick. "And you cashed the checks. You accepted the money. Did you ever once stop to think how your son, the one you refused to help with a simple college fund, was suddenly able to send you $4,000 a month? Or did you just not care enough to ask?" My father started to speak, a low, guttural protest, but James silenced him with a look. "I'll tell you how. He did it by sacrificing his youth. He did it by working himself to the point of collapse. He did it out of a misguided sense of love and duty to a family that saw him as nothing more than an ATM." James's legal mind was now on full display. He wasn't just angry. He was building a case, laying out the evidence for the jury of their peers. "After you told me about your family's supposed debt, I had my firm's legal department do a preliminary background check. Standard procedure for any marriage, you understand. We look into finances, potential liabilities. They found no debt. What they did find was a shocking pattern of financial exploitation, manipulation, and what amounts to long-term emotional abuse." He took a step closer to their table, his voice dropping slightly but losing none of its intensity. He gestured expansively at the lavish surroundings, the towering floral arrangements, the gleaming silverware, the 5-tier wedding cake. "This," he said, his voice ringing with contempt, "all of this wedding, which I now know you insisted on being this extravagant. The down payment you recently made on your new house, the luxury car you drive, Richard, the designer wardrobe you flaunt, Helen, the very dress on your back, Chloe. For years, I believed it was the fruit of your modeling career and your family's wise investments. But it was all a lie." He paused, letting the silence stretch, drawing out their agony. He looked at me, then back at them, his face a mask of cold, hard justice. And then he delivered the kill shot, the words that would be the epitaph of their social lives. "I want everyone here to understand this. Every luxury you see, every dollar this family has spent for the better part of a decade, came from one source. It was all paid for by the sweat of a man you called a failure, paid for by the sleepless nights of a man you called an embarrassment, paid for in full by the son you threw away. It was all Leo's money. The sound that went through the room was a collective, horrified gasp. Chloe finally broke, letting out a gut-wrenching sob and burying her face in her hands. My mother stumbled backward, her hand clamped over her mouth as if to hold in a scream. My father simply stared, his face ashen, his entire world having just been publicly and expertly dismantled, leaving him naked and exposed in the ruins. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You're awesome. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, just so I know you've journeyed with me this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. What followed was not a party, but a funeral. A funeral for my family's reputation. James's words had been a social execution, and the guests were now scrambling to get away from the crime scene. The first to leave were James's parents. They were a dignified, elderly couple who had watched the entire scene unfold with expressions of quiet horror. His mother walked over to James, squeezed his arm, and whispered something in his ear. His father simply looked at me and gave a solemn nod of respect. Then they walked out, their departure a clear and unambiguous verdict. Their exit triggered a mass exodus. The air filled with the scrape of chairs, the murmur of hushed, scandalized conversations, and the clinking of glasses being hastily set down. No one made eye contact with my family. They were radioactive pariahs at their own party. The string quartet packed up their instruments. The caterers began to clear away untouched plates of lobster and filet mignon. The 5-tier cake stood like a monument to a celebration that had died before it even began. I watched as James walked over to Chloe one last time. He knelt so he was at her eye level. I couldn't hear what he said, but his tone was devoid of anger. It was just final. He gently took her hand, and with a slow, deliberate movement, he slid the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. He placed it carefully on the white tablecloth next to her, a glittering symbol of a future that had just been erased. Then he stood up and walked over to me. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He put a hand on my back and guided me towards the exit, away from the wreckage. As we were leaving, I heard Chloe's voice rise in a desperate, hysterical wail. "It doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. We have the investment. The talent agency said I was going to be a global star. All our money is tied up in the promotion. It's a sure thing." Her words stopped me in my tracks. I turned and looked at James. He just shook his head, a look of profound pity on his face. "Leo, my legal team looked into that agency as well. It's a classic advance fee scam. They target naive people with dreams of fame, take all their money for fake promotional materials, and then disappear. There is no investment. There is no promotion. The money is gone. All of it." The final piece of their self-destruction clicked into place. They hadn't just been bled dry by their own greed. They had actively participated in their own financial suicide. They had taken every last cent they had. My father's retirement severance, their savings, probably money borrowed from loan sharks, and handed it over to con artists, all in a desperate, final gamble to prop up the fantasy of Chloe's success. I looked back at the head table. My mother was trying to comfort a wailing Chloe. My father was sitting motionless, staring at the glittering, abandoned engagement ring on the table. They weren't just socially ruined. They were financially annihilated. They had nothing left, and they had no one to blame but themselves. James and I stood outside in the cool night air, the sounds of the city a welcome relief from the suffocating silence of the ballroom. "I'm sorry, Leo," he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "I'm sorry for bringing them back into your life. I'm sorry for all of this." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said, and I meant it. "You gave me something I haven't had in a very long time, James. You gave me the truth." We stood in silence for a moment, and then I knew there was one last thing I had to do. Not for them. For me. "I'll be right back," I said. I walked back into the ballroom. It was nearly empty now, a ghost of a party. My family was still at their table, a tableau of utter devastation. They looked up as I approached, their eyes a desperate, pathetic mix of fear and a last, insane glimmer of hope that I was there to save them. My mother was the first to speak, her voice a ragged, pleading whisper. "Leonard, your friend, Mr. Donovan. He's a powerful man. You have to talk to him. You have to fix this. Tell him it was all a misunderstanding." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt nothing but a profound, empty pity. "There is no misunderstanding, Mom, and there is nothing to fix. The truth is the truth." "But we're your family," my father croaked, his voice hoarse. "Blood is thicker than water." "Is it?" I asked, my voice calm and even. "Is it thicker than money? Thicker than lies? You had a son who would have done anything for you. You had a son who worked his body to the breaking point just for the hope that you might one day say you were proud of him. And you took that and you twisted it and you used it to buy yourselves a life you didn't earn. That's not family. That's a hostage situation. And today I've been set free." I took a deep breath, the last deep breath of my old life. "I came back to tell you one thing. I forgive you." A flicker of desperate hope ignited in their eyes. I quickly extinguished it. "I don't forgive you because you deserve it. You will never deserve it. I forgive you because I am done. I am done being angry. I am done carrying the weight of your cruelty. I am letting it all go, right here, in this ridiculous, empty room. My anger has been the anchor holding me to you, and I am cutting the rope." I reached into my suit pocket and pulled out my business card. I slid it across the table. It came to a rest next to the abandoned engagement ring. "From this moment on, we are strangers. Do not call me. Do not contact me. We are done. But I will make you one promise. If the day ever comes when you are truly destitute, homeless, starving, with nowhere else to go, you can call the number on that card. You will speak to my assistant. She will be authorized to arrange for a one-time payment to a homeless shelter and a soup kitchen on your behalf. That is the beginning and the end of my final obligation to you." I looked at each of them one last time. My shell-shocked father, my weeping mother, my broken sister, and I felt nothing. The gaping wound they had left in my life had finally scarred over. I turned, and without looking back, I walked out of the ballroom and into the rest of my life. The 2 years that followed were a renaissance. For the first time since I was a child, I felt light. The crushing weight of my family's judgment and my own secret resentment had been lifted, and in its place was a quiet, expansive peace. James was more than a boss, he became a brother. Our shared, bizarre history forged a bond of loyalty and trust between us. He officially promoted me to partner in the firm, giving me a stake in the company I had helped save. "This isn't a gift, Leo," he'd said, signing the papers. "This is a correction. It's where you should have been all along." My salary became a number I could have only dreamed of, but the real wealth was the freedom. The freedom to create, to innovate, and to be recognized for my own merits. I bought a condo in a converted warehouse downtown, with high ceilings, exposed brick, and a massive wall of windows that overlooked the city. Every morning, I would drink my coffee and look out at the Donovan Tower, my tower, and feel a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment. It was a monument not just to architectural design, but to survival. I reconnected with old friends. I started traveling. I took up hiking, losing myself for hours in the silence of the mountains, a silence that was peaceful, not lonely. I was healing. I kept my word. I changed my phone number, and I instructed my assistant, a wonderfully efficient woman named Clara, on the protocol if anyone from my past life ever called. They never did. But the world is a small place. News finds its way through the cracks. About a year after the wedding, I was on site at a new project, a community arts center we were building in a lower-income neighborhood. As I was walking through the site with the foreman, I saw a cleaning crew working near the portable toilets. One of the workers was an older man, moving with a slow, pained shuffle. He wore a faded orange vest over a stained jumpsuit. It was my father. He looked up and our eyes met across the dusty expanse. For a single, agonizing second, the world stood still. I saw it all in his eyes. The shock, the shame, the crushing weight of his new reality. He didn't look angry. He just looked old and broken. He broke eye contact first, turning away with a jerky movement and busying himself with a trash can, his back rigid with humiliation. The foreman next to me grunted. Poor guy. Heard he lost everything in some kind of investment scam. Used to be some kind of manager, now he's here. Life comes at you fast. I didn't respond. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. There was no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a deep, aching sadness for the man he could have been, for the father he never was. I turned and walked away. I heard about Chloe from Noah. Her story was a sad, predictable spiral. With no money, no connections, and no discernible skills beyond a pretty face that was beginning to show the strain of a hard life, she had drifted. She tried to launch a career as a social media influencer, but her entitled attitude and lack of any real content made her a laughingstock. She bounced between low-wage service jobs, always getting fired for her laziness or her temper. The last Noah had heard, she was working as a shot girl in a dive bar 2 towns over, living in a weekly rental motel. The golden child had lost her shine. Their downfall was absolute, a direct consequence of the choices they had made. They had worshipped a false idol in Chloe and had sacrificed a true asset in me. They had sown seeds of greed and favoritism, and they were now reaping a harvest of ruin and obscurity. About 6 months after I saw my father, Clara buzzed my office intercom. Mr. Leo, there's a woman in the lobby named Helen. She has no appointment, but she's very insistent on speaking with you. She says you'll know who she is. My heart hammered against my ribs. My first instinct was to tell Clara to send her away, to enforce the boundary I had set. But a deeper, quieter voice urged me to see it through. This was the last ghost. I needed to face it. Send her up, Clara, I said. When she walked into my office, I almost didn't recognize her. The 2.5 years had been brutally unkind. The proud, defiant posture was gone, replaced by a weary slump. Her expensive clothes were gone. Her hair was unkempt, and her face was a roadmap of stress and sorrow. She looked her age and then some. She stood awkwardly in the doorway of my large, sunlit office, looking at the architectural models, the blueprints on the walls, and at me, sitting behind a large mahogany desk. It was a world she could have been a part of, and the knowledge of that was written all over her face. Leonard, she said, her voice raspy. Hello, Helen, I replied, my tone neutral. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Please sit. She did, perching on the edge of the leather seat as if she didn't deserve its comfort. She didn't ask for money. She didn't make excuses. She just sat there for a long moment, twisting the strap of her worn handbag. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said finally. Her voice choked with an emotion I couldn't identify. God knows you have every right to throw me out. I had to try to explain. Why? I remained silent, letting her speak. This was her confession, not a conversation. When I was young, she began, her eyes fixed on a point on my desk. I was Chloe. I was the pretty one. I had dreams. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to see my name in lights. I wanted a life that was bigger, more glamorous than the one my parents had. She took a shaky breath. But life happens. I met your father. I got pregnant with you. And just like that, the door to that other life slammed shut. I loved you, Leonard, in my own broken way. But every time I looked at you, you were a reminder of the life of responsibility I had, not the life of dreams I wanted. Her gaze finally met mine, and her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. And then Chloe was born, and it was like looking in a mirror back in time. She was my second chance. All the dreams I had buried, all the ambitions I had given up, I poured them all into her. I told myself that if I could make her a star, it would make my own ordinary life worth something. It was selfish. It was monstrous. And you? She whispered, a tear finally tracing a path through her wrinkled makeup. You became the enemy of that dream. You were so capable, so serious, so much like your grandfather. You were a constant reminder that a practical, hard-working life was also a choice. A choice I had rejected. I resented you for it. I punished you for it. I sacrificed you for a fantasy. And I lost everything. I lost both my children, my home, my husband. Richard and I are getting a divorce. He blames me. Chloe blames me. They're right. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. And it unlocked the last, rusted piece of the puzzle of my own childhood. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. I was just collateral damage in her war with her own regrets. I took a deep breath. "Thank you for telling me," I said, and I meant it. The apology didn't heal the wounds, but it cleaned them. A few weeks later, at a charity gala for the arts center I had helped design, James clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, there's someone you need to meet. She's one of our pro bono lawyers on this project, and she's brilliant." He introduced me to a woman named Nicole. She had a laugh that could light up a room and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and humor. "So you're the legendary Leo," she said, shaking my hand. "The man who builds things. James talks about you like you're a superhero." "Hardly," I laughed. "I just draw the lines. Other people do the real work." We talked for hours, leaning against a railing overlooking the city. We talked about architecture and the law, about silly movies and serious books. It was the easiest, most natural conversation I had ever had. And for the first time, when a woman looked at me, I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth. I could just be, just Leo. Tonight, I am standing on the balcony of my condo. The city spreads out before me, a glittering tapestry of light and life. The Donovan Tower stands tallest, a proud beacon in the night, its peak lit in a soft, welcoming blue. My tower, a physical manifestation of a dream I was told to abandon. My grandfather used to tell me that my name, Leonard, meant lion-strong. For most of my life, I misinterpreted what that meant. I thought strength was about enduring pain in silence. I thought it was about working until you collapsed, about absorbing insults and injustice without complaint. Then, after the wedding, I thought strength was about the roar. The triumphant, vindicating roar of truth that brought my enemies to their knees. But I've learned that the roar is the easy part. It's loud and it's satisfying, but it's fleeting. The true strength of a lion isn't in its roar, but in its presence. It's the quiet, unshakable confidence to know your own worth, even when no one else does. It's the strength to walk away from a pride that doesn't value you and to build your own territory from scratch. It's the strength to set a boundary and defend it, not with anger, but with a calm and absolute resolve. Most of all, I've learned that true strength is the courage to forgive. Not to excuse their actions, but to release myself from the prison of my own resentment. My anger was the last chain that bound me to them, and by letting it go, I finally became free. My strength wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in proving my grandfather right. I took the fire he saw in me, and I built something magnificent. Not just a building, but a life. A life filled with purpose, peace, and the quiet joy of being the architect of my own future. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Nicole. We've been seeing each other for a few months now, and it's been easy. Wonderful. Still up for that hike on Saturday? I'll even pack the snacks this time. I smile. A genuine, uncomplicated smile that feels like it starts from my soul. The past is a part of my blueprint, the foundation upon which I'm built. But it's not the whole structure. There are so many more floors to design, so many more rooms to build. And for the first time, I'm not building alone. I type back my reply. Absolutely. Can't wait. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had to overcome a family situation? Share your story in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next.